Everyone asks the same question. Not how. Everyone assumes they already know how. They ask why you're lying about it. You're sitting at a cafe in Lisbon. Your coffee costs $2.80. You've been there for 3 weeks, and you're not leaving because you have a flight booked. You're leaving because you're bored. Your phone buzzes. Another message from someone back home. Must be nice to travel on your parents' money. You're 32. You've never taken a dime from anyone. But that's not the point. The point is that the moment you step outside the system, people immediately rewrite your story to fit what makes them comfortable. Here's what actually happened, and why almost nobody believes it. You didn't win the lottery. You didn't inherit anything. You didn't stumble into crypto at the right moment. What you did was much simpler and infinitely more disturbing to watch. You made a series of deliberate, unsexy financial decisions that compounded for 11 years. At 21, you were making $38,000 a year as a junior analyst. Not exceptional. Not even good. You were average. But you noticed something that most people miss. Your peers were optimizing for the wrong variable. They were optimizing for income growth. They'd switch jobs every 3 years hunting for a 12% raise, pat themselves on the back, immediately inflate their lifestyle, and end up in the exact same financial position. You optimized for something else, the gap between what you made and what you spent. That gap is what matters. That gap is the only variable that actually compounds. You started tracking it obsessively, not with an app, with a spreadsheet. Every dollar in, every dollar out. You weren't trying to be frugal. You were trying to be honest about where the money actually went. Most people never do this. They have a general sense that they're saving okay or spending too much, but they never look at the actual numbers. Within 6 months, you'd found $1,100 a month you weren't even aware you were bleeding. That's $13,200 a year. That doesn't sound like much until you run the math on what compound interest does to 13 grand a year over 11 years. At the same time, you did something that made people actually angry with you. You stopped talking about your income. Not because you were hiding it, because once you started saying the number out loud, every conversation shifted. People stopped listening to your advice and started calculating whether you made more than them. The moment you're making more, everything you say becomes easy for you. The moment you're making less, everything becomes naive. So you stop saying anything. You let people assume you made what everyone else made. You let them think you were lucky, or boring, or both. The real work wasn't the saving. It was the investing. You opened a Roth IRA at 22. You dumped $5,500 into a total market index fund. Every year you maxed it out. By year 11, you'd contributed $60,500. The market had done what it always does, gone up. Your $60,500 had become $127,000. You didn't pick stocks. You didn't time the market. You just bought the whole thing and waited. That single account is now generating about $5,000 a year in passive returns, and you don't touch it. Then there was the 401k. Your employer matched 4%. You never skipped a paycheck without hitting that match. That was free money. You didn't think of it as retirement savings. You thought of it as salary negotiation. You were literally leaving money on the table if you didn't take it. Same mechanical discipline, no drama. By 32, that account had hit $340,000. Then came the taxable brokerage account. This is the one people don't talk about. This is the one that broke the chain that connected you to the system. Every bonus, every tax refund, every time you sold something you didn't need, it all went into a taxable brokerage account, invested in the same index funds. Nothing fancy, nothing that required skill. You were just pulling money out of your spending stream before you had the chance to get attached to it. The key mechanic here is what financial people call pay yourself first. But that phrase is so memed out that nobody actually does it. You did. By 31, that account had $280,000 in it. Your total liquid wealth was just over $750,000. Your annual expenses were running about $45,000. Do the math. 4% of $750,000 is $30,000. You were spending $45,000. That wasn't quite enough. But it was close enough that the answer to "how long can you work" became "not long." You worked one more year. You didn't grind harder. You didn't try to optimize the last 1%. You just showed up and did the job. You were still saving aggressively, but now every paycheck felt optional. That distinction matters psychologically. That's when work stops being fear-based and becomes choice-based. You were no longer working to survive. You were working to accelerate the end date. By 32, you had $850,000. Your expenses were $45,000 a year. You could live on 3.5% of your portfolio. That's slightly aggressive by the old rules, but you have options. You're young, your costs are flexible, and you can work part-time if markets crash. You weren't mathematically forced to work anymore. So you didn't. You bought a one-way ticket to Portugal. Not because you hate your country, not because you're running from anything, because the math said you could, and you had the weird intellectual honesty to actually do it. The first person to disbelieve you was your mother. She asked if you'd saved up a little bit for the trip. When you told her you'd quit and weren't coming back, she went quiet for 3 minutes. Then she asked how long you were planning to travel before you get a real job again. You haven't corrected her. It would just make her more anxious. The second person was a former colleague. He'd heard rumors you left and was traveling or something. When he heard it was permanent, he immediately went into a frame where you must have discovered something. A hack. A loophole. He kept asking what business you'd started, what you were flipping, what the actual plan was. When you said you just invested money conservatively for 11 years and now you were living on it, he looked at you like you told him the earth was flat. "That takes too long," he said. "Yeah," you agreed. "It does." This is the dangerous part. The part where nobody believes you. Because the person who believes you might actually do it, and the system doesn't want you to do it. The system wants you to need the job. The system wants you dependent on the paycheck. The system wants you to believe that financial independence requires either luck, inheritance, or a secret that only special people know. And the secret is actually just make a bigger gap between income and spending. Invest the gap. Wait, that's it. That's the whole secret. It's so simple that people refuse to believe it's true. You're 32 years old and you're living in a different city every 3 months. You're writing, consulting on the side maybe 10 hours a week, and you're not stressed. You're genuinely not stressed. You check your portfolio once a month out of curiosity, not fear. You're not checking job postings. You're not networking for your next move. You're not performing for anyone. The freedom people imagine when they talk about, "someday I'll retire," that's your actual life right now. And the thing that breaks people's minds is this. You're not special. You didn't have some rare skill or supernatural discipline. You just made one decision that 99% of people refuse to make. You chose the gap over the lifestyle. You chose the compound returns over the status signals. You chose the boring index fund over the hot tip. Most people will read this and think one of two things. Either you're lying or you're lucky. Neither is true. You're just boring. You're just competent. You're just willing to look poor while getting rich. The real question nobody wants to answer is the one that statement forces them to ask themselves. If someone completely ordinary can do this, what does that say about my own choices? That question makes people angry. So they convince themselves you must be lying. You're not lying. You're just living the life they all said was impossible.